Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Thanks so much for being here. California, I live in San Diego, California, in the next even phase of further lockdowns right now. And we're gonna be in this phase for at least a month. In this segment, I wanna talk about the fundamental philosophical divide, one of the fundamental philosophical divides between progressives and conservatives. We'll relate it back to COVID and how progressives and conservatives react to COVID. This is why, this reason we'll talk about here, this is why there are such different opinions on what we should do related to COVID, because of this philosophical difference. Almost everything we talk about on this show can be related back to this clip. It's one of the most important clips you'll ever hear, in politics certainly, and in many ways even in life. This is the great Thomas Sowell.
What is the liberal premise?
I guess the Rousseau notion, that man is born free but is everywhere in chains, that the real problem with the world is that the institutions are wrong. If the institutions were right, then there was nothing in human nature that would cause us to be unhappy. It's the fact that we have the wrong institution.
What is the conservative premise?
That man is flawed from day one, and that there are no solutions, there are only trade-offs. And whatever you do to deal with one of man's flaws, it creates another problem, but that you try to get the best trade-off you can get, and that's all you can hope for. I've often said there are three questions that I think would destroy most of the arguments on the left. And the first is, compared to what? The second is, at what cost? And the third is, what hard evidence do you have? Now, there are very few ideas on the left that can pass all three of those kinds of things.
Can conservative ideas pass those?
Yes, I think so, because they don't assume that there is a solution out there. Adam Smith didn't believe that either the government or the market could solve all problems, that you have to be able to simply tolerate certain things. And the idea to the left of tolerating any evil, that they want to stamp out the last vestige of segregation. Really? At what price?
So good. COVID's a perfect case study of this. The left wants to stamp out every last case of COVID. No more COVID. Not a single case of COVID is acceptable, which is absurd because we don't accept that standard for anything. Right? No other ailment, the flu or anything else. But at what price? Okay, let's go through this clip from the beginning. So the left believes that the real problem in the world is that the institutions are wrong. We need a better CDC. We need the governor to do more. We need local health boards to do more, restrict more, shut down more, and only then we'll be okay. The problem is the government's not big enough. They don't have enough power, right? We've got to shut down our schools. Then all of our problems will be solved. This is why the mayor of Los Angeles, the second largest city in the country, literally said we need to cancel everything. Think about that. Cancel everything. Like, that's unthinkable. That's unimaginable. Cancel everything. But conservatives, we understand, and here's the key, there are no solutions, only trade-offs. There are no solutions, only trade-offs. You can't eliminate the virus without there being massive negative trade-offs that need to be considered. And sane, rational people sit down, debate those trade-offs, and try to find the right balance together. So I think of it like this. You can think of it as 4 dials or 4 bar graphs or 4 baskets, however you want to think about it. But imagine there's 4 different categories and you have 100 points. You have 100 points that you're free to distribute into any of those 4 baskets or columns. Where do you place them? Where do you place your 100 points? In which baskets and to what amount? Right? And these baskets represent your priorities. There's 4 categories. First, you have your physical health. That's the virus. It's you and the nation, right? Physical health, that's the virus. Emotional health, right? No socializing, no sports, no concerts, no gatherings. Lock all the old people up. They can't see anyone. My mom hasn't met her 9-month-old grandchild yet because she would have to fly across the country in order to do that, right? There's an emotional cost to that. Spiritual health. So you have physical health, emotional health, spiritual health, closing churches, that's very bad, and then economic health, right? And they're all connected. So if you lose your job, your economic health goes down, then your emotional health will suffer. If you don't go to church, your spiritual health goes down, and that affects your physical health. And then the other way, if you do go to church, right? So yes, it's more physical, or that's more spiritual, but then that's more likely that the virus will spread, so physical perhaps goes down a little bit. They're all interconnected to each other. It's all trade-off. So we have to figure out how we balance this best, how we balance the trade-offs. The left, on the other hand, they put all of their units, all their points in the physical health. No one could ever get sick. Cancel everything, no one gets sick. That's their utopian vision. But as Sowell said, at what cost? They don't even consider it. And that's my point for progressives. The costs are never even a consideration. It's got to go to court. It's got to go to the Supreme Court. And the court has to say, hey, Governor Cuomo, you have to open up churches. So where progressives put all their points, points in the physical health basket, they leave the other three bone dry. Conservatives, as we're being called evil and bigots and we don't care about the virus and all these other things, we look for more balance. It's like, yeah, we don't want people to get sick, of course, but that's life, and that's not all of life. Right? There's other things here too. And fortunately, it's not deadly for most people. We shared the fact the other day that more people, how do I word this? Actually, it's the same. So the deaths 85 and over is the same number of deaths as the age of 1 to 70 combined. Make sense? So people 1 through 70, the number of people who have died aged 1 through 70 is the same as people 85 and over. So in a way, fortunately, there's a virus that only affects a certain amount of people, right? So great, let's protect them. Okay, that's physical health. All right, now let's factor these other things too. Let's keep our economy open, right? We gotta do that. Now, yes, we're not gonna put all of our points in that basket, so let's limit the capacity a little bit, okay? Except for church, we gotta open up our churches. That's very important. Yes, we'll keep them open and more people are gonna get sick, so fewer points in the physical health basket, and we gotta put some points in the emotional health basket, right? People still need to be connected with each other emotionally, otherwise there's major health ramifications that happen there. There's not just the virus physical health, there's also the depression and addiction and all that, right? Do you see? And we have to find the right balance. Progressives put 100 points in physical health and just call it a day, see what happens. And I don't know, we can figure it out. We could sit here and debate this, right? But I would put maybe 30 points in that basket and then maybe 40 points in the spiritual basket, right? So they were at 70. Okay, so where do I put the other point? You with me? And this is what rational, sane people do. But the left won't let you. Because if you put anything less than 100 points in the physical health basket, then you want grandma to die. And you hear the argument from the left too, like, oh, well, if everyone dies, then there'll be no economy. You're like, yeah, but that's not, right? That's them making the argument that all the points need to go into the physical health basket. But by saying that, they're also ignoring the reality that this is not the bubonic plague, with everyone who gets it dropping dead in the next 2 days. I would bet big money that there is no one I know the governor of California or governor of Michigan or the governor of New York, no one on these teams, their COVID task force, who are there to say, whoa, hold on, guys. What about this? What about this balance? Have you considered this thing over here? Do you know the term groupthink? You've heard the term groupthink? I think we've all heard that by now. The first time I ever heard that word was in the aftermath of the Iraq War. And the question was, how did we all get driven into Iraq? It's because everyone on the team was thinking the same direction. Everyone was thinking the same thing. There were no outside voices asking the questions that needed to be asked. And I think it's the same thing now. As Sowell said, there's no solutions, only trade-offs. Whenever you deal with one of man's flaws, it creates another problem. But you try to get the best trade-off you can get, and that's all you can hope for. Our leaders are not doing that. They're not doing that. It's just a big pile of groupthink, all moving in one direction. And then on top of that, they throw in their hypocrisy, right? Gavin Newsom puts all his points in the health basket and then goes to the French Laundry. And we can do that all day, and we've shared that many times before. And it just proves that these politicians, these leaders, they're not really scared of the virus. They're not scared of getting it. They're not scared of getting sick. They're not scared of dying. They're not scared of spreading it to grandma. And that's all the proof you need about where their priorities really are. Gavin Newsom and his wife, when they went to the French Laundry to eat inside with a large group of people without wearing masks, not distance, they were not concerned about getting COVID. They were not concerned about spreading COVID. So should we? Here's another trade-off. There's more about that I want to talk about in the next segment. I want to talk about the rest of the Thomas Sowell clip, the second part, about the 3 questions that you need to ask about every progressive policy. We'll talk about those next. But here's another trade-off too, right? You own a home, and that's awesome. It's great, amazing. But there's a trade-off, right? You're now responsible for fixing things that break, right? There's no landlord to call. Also, you got to keep it safe. You got to keep the people in it safe, but you got to keep it safe. Your home title. 65% of title claims are fraud related. What? 65% of title claims are fraud related because it's all online. It's so easy to hack into. And people hack into it, they get your title, they can trace your signature and do whatever they want. And one type of fraud is to take out a quitclaim deed. And then they start taking out loans against your home until all your equity's gone. And you don't even know this happened until the collection bills come. Or maybe you try to sell your house and you find out you don't even really own it anymore. Home Title Lock, and only Home Title Lock, will monitor your home title for you. No other ID theft programs do this. The bank doesn't do this. The county doesn't do this. They think the thief, the hacker is you, right? So they're not monitoring you. Home Title Lock is, and they'll pay up to $250,000 in legal fees to help restore your home title for you. That's why I say it's just part of owning house, part of the trade-off. Use the promo code RADIO and you get 30 days free protection. And you can register on, go to the website and you can register and see if you're already a victim right now. Code RADIO, 30 days free protection. HomeTitleLock.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders. In this segment, I want to further break down this concept from Thomas Sowell, which I think is 100% true, that progressives only deal with utopia, and conservatives, however, understand that there are no solutions, only trade-offs. I had to hear that Thomas Sowell clip maybe 20, 30 times before it finally clicked, and now everything can be related back to it. So think about like your gun, okay, where you keep your gun. There's no solution to that question, where to keep it. There's only trade-offs. So if you keep it under your pillow, that's maximum speed if you need it. Someone busts through your door, boom, you got it. But it's not that safe, right? Kid can easily get it. A robber, if you're not home, can easily find it, right? So you gotta trade that off. So the other extreme is you can keep your gun disassembled, locked away in a safe, behind a hidden compartment in your closet, right? That's maximum safety, but it's not very helpful if someone breaks into your house and you need it. You're like, oh, hold on, I gotta find my gun, I gotta put it together, right? So there's no solution to that question. Where do you keep your gun? There's no answer, just trade-offs. Make sense? I'll give you my cool, hip millennial pop culture reference. So my generation of video games, Mario Kart 64, I will crush you in it. I've had so many conversations, I haven't played it in 10 years, and I will crush you in Mario Kart 64. So anyway, the characters you choose, you could choose Bowser. Bowser has the highest top speed, but very slow acceleration. So if you ever crash, you're not gonna be able to get back on the track quick. Yoshi, my go-to character, super fast acceleration, great control, but not high top speed. Mario, he's kind of the most average all around, et cetera, et cetera. Street Fighter, right? Just like Yoshi, Chun-Li was my character, quick, fast, lightning quicks, but not as powerful. E. Honda, on the other hand, the sumo wrestler, very slow, lumbering, but super strong. If you get like his arm thing going up and down. You guys gotta come back to me. You gotta show the arm, doing the arm thing there, the E-Honda, E-Honda arm. All right? Everything's a trade-off. Which character are you, okay? COVID's a perfect example of this. And this clip right here is a nice microcosm of this conversation, how we should be having it. Now, I'm not a fan of these yelling matches on cable news. There's a certain, like CNBC has a certain kind of yelling that they do. It's weird. So I don't like this, but this is a good example of what we've been talking about at work. So you got Rick Santelli, who's on the right. Andrew Sorkin would be on the left. You hear it?
The difference between a big box retailer and a restaurant, or frankly, even a church, are so different, it's unbelievable. Going into a big box retailer,
I disagree.
You're wearing a mask.
You can have your thoughts and I can have mine.
You're required to wear a mask.
I disagree.
It's science. I'm sorry. It's science. If you're wearing a mask, it's a different story.
500 people in a Lowe's aren't any safer than 150 people in a restaurant that holds 600. I don't believe it. Sorry. Don't believe
Okay.
it. And I live in an area where there's a lot of restaurants that have fought back and they don't have any problems. And they're open.
Okay. You don't have to believe it, but let me just say this. You're doing a disservice to the viewer because the viewers need to understand it.
You are doing a disservice to the viewer. You are. You are.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If I would like to keep our viewers as healthy as humanly possible. The idea of packing people into restaurants.
I think our viewers are smart enough to make part of those decisions on their own.
Completely different
I don't
things.
think that I'm much smarter than all the viewers like some people do.
Okay, did you catch that line? So SANTELLI is talking about trade-offs. 500 people in Lowe's, that's no safer than 150 people in a 600-person restaurant. But like that's a perfect example. Like, he's not saying we need to put 600 people in the restaurant that sits 600 people. Just 150, that's an economic trade-off. We're not gonna have full capacity, so we're gonna, but there's no safer than the 500 at Lowe's, right? So he's just making balances and trade-offs. Sorkin, his response is, did you catch it at the end? I would like to keep our viewers as healthy as what? As healthy as humanly possible. As humanly possible. That's his only priority. And I'm telling you, that is impossible. You can't keep someone as healthy as humanly possible. It doesn't even make any sense. What does that even mean? Right? So what's as healthy as human possible? Okay, well, you gotta lay down in your bed all day. Lay down in your bed, that way you never get hurt. Well, that's not healthy. So how do you get healthy? Okay, we gotta go out for a run. You gotta exercise a little bit. Okay, so you go out for a run, but then you twist your ankle. Is that healthy? Right? No, but you gotta balance, you gotta trade it off. And everyone knows this, but progressives in policy pretend that they don't. Even though everyone knows that it's true, that everything is always about trade-offs. But here, that's his only priority. We gotta keep everyone as healthy as humanly possible with a virus that has a 99.99% survival rate for most people, right? So Thomas Sowell's 3 questions that you gotta ask about every progressive policy. First, compared to what? Second, at what cost? And what hard evidence do you have? Very few ideas on the left can pass all 3 of those questions. And just ask Sorkin, right? He wants to keep everyone as safe as humanly possible. That second question, at what cost? There's no answer. He doesn't give an answer because it's not even considered. There's no cost big enough. But that's just not reality. It's also easy for him to say, as he's still getting paid, which is one of the biggest things to keep in mind. We'll talk more about this one tomorrow. There's never been a greater wealth, so especially for the left, right? The left is anti-big corporations and anti the rich-poor gap and the education gap, right? They've talked about that for years. There's never been anything in American history that has made that economic gap larger than COVID and their COVID policies. There's nothing that's made the education gap even wider than these COVID policies. There's nothing that's made the rich richer and the poor poor, nothing in history more than their COVID regulations, COVID policies. But they don't care, they're not even considering that because you gotta keep everyone as safe as humanly possible. There's this cartoon, I gotta find it here, I've talked about it a few times. Everyone's drowning in the ocean of COVID, and then you have this giant yacht, and it has politicians and bureaucrats and scientists on it, and one of them's got a bullhorn, and he says, "Hang in there, everyone, we're all in this together." Like, no, we're not at all. If back in February, if you put $100,000 into Planet Fitness stock, you would now have $300,000. If in February you worked at Planet Fitness, you're probably unemployed today. So we are not all in this together. And we gotta stop listening to people who don't have skin in the game. And in fact, these politicians, if anything, have an incentive to make things worse because then they get more power. But anyway, we'll do that tomorrow. That last point of Sowell, last question. What hard evidence do you have? So let's take California. So California, you're not allowed to eat outside anymore. You can't even eat outside, okay? What evidence is there that outdoor dining spreads COVID? What's the hard evidence? So LA County, it was like 2 weeks ago, they banned outdoor dining before everyone else. We talked about the LA County supervisor who said it's a most dangerous situation, outdoor dining, and then that night went to Santa Monica to eat outside, okay? So an LA judge said, county government, you guys have to come back and show evidence as to why you did this. You have to show evidence in order to support your ban. This is that judge. I'm quoting the LA Times about the judge. Chalfant expressed some skepticism about the ban, that's the judge. Based on the studies he's reviewed, the risk of spreading the coronavirus from outdoor dining appears minimal. The judge also asked county officials to explain why the ban was keyed to the 5-day average of new coronavirus cases hitting 4,000, like why that metric and why that number. The county must provide data on hospital capacity and ICU beds to support its claim that the healthcare system would be overwhelmed without the ban. So that's what the judge is asking for hard evidence. Where's the hard evidence that COVID is spread by outdoor dining? You can't just say it and then shut down all restaurants without proof, without evidence. This has never happened before. The government just shutting down all the restaurants on a whim like this. And without evidence, this is a whim. It's just a whim if you don't have the hard evidence. What's the hard evidence that we need to shut down playgrounds? Why can't kids go to the playground? There's no evidence that COVID spreads on playgrounds. Why can't kids go to school? There's no hard evidence that kids, actually there is hard evidence for months now that kids don't get or spread COVID in any meaningful way in schools. But the people on the left in this country, they take the approach, the default position is that everything must be closed. Everything must be closed, that's the default, and maybe you can prove why you should be allowed to open. And you can make your plea to King Newsom and all the other fiat makers across the country as to why you should be exempted, as opposed to the other way around, which is what conservatives would say, because we live in America, a free country, where everything, of course, is open. And then someone proves that this person's a bad actor or this industry spreads COVID a lot, then you could possibly be shut down. We could have that conversation, but instead we're doing it completely backwards, where everything's shut down. But then if you could say, oh, we're a ski resort, please, Newsom, please allow us to be open. Okay, we'll allow ski resorts to be open. We're Hollywood. Hollywood goes to Gavin Newsom and says we need to be open. They beg Newsom, and the governor allows it. So now we can make movies and TV shows again. That's essential. But this other restaurant and whose person's livelihood is in it isn't, right? We got to completely flip that around where everything should be open by default until proven otherwise. Got to go here. We talk on this show a ton about the urban versus rural divide. There's a philosophical divide, right? Is there such thing as objective truth, or is all truth subjective? That's a big division. But the biggest policy difference, progressives believe, are we looking for utopia? Or progressives believe we are looking for utopia. Conservatives understand there is no solution, only trade-offs. Gold's another example, right? So we shut down the economy, right? So we shut it down, no one's working, people need money, so the feds print it, and the government just doles trillions of dollars out, okay? It's great. But now it's all worth less. There's trade-offs, no solutions, right? The left just stops there, and they say, oh, everyone's just got a bunch of money now, everything's good. And conservatives say, whoa, you print more, it's all now worth less, inflation goes up. When inflation goes up, what happens to gold? Price of gold shoots through the roof, right? It's all about trade-offs. Most people, as we just talked about, don't understand that. You do. So with gold, you can play the short game. So gold today is $18.30 an ounce. People are looking at maybe, I saw Goldman or whoever talked about maybe like $19.25, maybe as high as $2,000 by the end of the year. But that's not why I have gold. I'm not playing like the 1 week trading game, right? I have it because of medium and long-term realities. Right? We're spending money insane amounts. And I don't think the ramifications, the economic ramifications of COVID have even been felt yet. And then long-term, I want to pass this down to my kids. What an amazing gift. If my dad spent $10,000 in 1970 on gold, he'd hand it over to me, the same amount of gold, and it'd be worth $500,000. What a gift. You could buy a house, right? $10,000 in 1970, just a little piece of gold, hands it to me, and now it's worth $500,000. So where do you get it from? Patriot Gold Group, they're the best. A+ Better Business Bureau, whole thing, you know. Get gold in your hands, give them a call, 1-800-798-4260. 1-800-798-4260 or patriotgoldgroup.com. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So in the past, we've done specials on the red wave that was the November 3rd election, which seems like forever ago. But I want to spend more time here talking about the women that were elected to Congress and all across the country. I want to do that with the president and the founder of the CLARE Booth LUCE Center for Conservative Women. It is Michelle Easton. Michelle, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you.
Give me some numbers and then maybe some great stories of the women who are now in Congress representing conservative values.
Well, we have more conservative women in the House of Representatives than we ever had before. We have 26, and 17 of them were elected for the first time. Many of them flipped districts. My favorite is from New York, Nicole Malliotakis, who won in Staten Island, ran against Mayor de Blasio, is a good, solid conservative, a woman of faith. Her family is key, and she's one of the leaders of the new group of conservative women in the U.S. House of Representatives. It's a great occasion.
My understanding is she has Cuban ancestry as well, and there's a couple other women who have been elected that have Cuban ancestry.
Yes, and when they hear AOC and some of these other left-wing women speaking about, the greatness of socialism, they know it. They or their families have lived it in Cuba, where it's not so great. It's not so great. And so when they speak about freedom, the freedom that America offers to our citizens, they do it from experience. It's not a book they read. They're very powerful women.
These women are up against, and I'd say all women, are up against a massive cultural tidal wave that says women must be feminists and women should be like AOC, right? Like that's the archetype millennial woman moving forward. How do we fight against that?
It's totally false. What we do here at the Clare Boothe Luce Center for Conservative Women is we celebrate the great conservative women leaders. One way we do it is through this calendar we have. We put it out every year. Great American Conservative Women. You can get it on our website. But we hold up these great conservative women, women of faith, women of family tradition, women with extraordinary careers, and we use them as role models for young women in college and in high school because, believe me, they don't hear about a lot of conservative women role models. For example, women's studies programs in colleges all over the country. They never talk about conservative women except perhaps to condescend or to ridicule them. So the way to get more women understanding our conservative ideas, in our opinion, is using these great conservative role models that we do at Clare Boothe Luce. If you just listen to ABC, NBC, and CBS, you're not going to be a conservative. No. We encourage women to read more, to talk to different people, to listen to the few conservative media outlets there are. And of course, the internet is filled with great people, and the shows like yours. They're not going to get it unless they work at it. You become a liberal by osmosis, just by sitting there in high school and in college, in most cases. A couple of wonderful exceptions, a couple of colleges and high schools that give a balanced view. But you're not going to become a conservative woman just by sitting there. You have to work at it. And so that's what we do. We work at promoting these great role models with their conservative ideas to the maximum extent possible to young women.
Yeah, that's such a good point that you just get it just through osmosis. Just sitting there, you become a progressive. Wow, that's interesting. Well, I was going to ask for an example like modern day, but let's take a minute here to talk about Clare Boothe Luce, right? Like, who is she?
Extraordinary woman. When I founded this organization to promote conservative women, to help young women become the future leaders, I looked through history for names of women who were very, very accomplished. And the truth is, it was no contest. When I looked back, Mrs. Luce, a woman of great faith, a woman who adored and revered her family, a woman with an amazing professional career during a time when women just were not at the podium. The cover of our calendar shows her. This is the 1944 Republican National Convention. She was the keynote speaker. She was a congresswoman then from Connecticut, and she gave a wonderful speech, and she said, Roosevelt lied us into war, which is what my family, my father, my grandfather, they were Navy, had always said. And she became more and more well-known. She was strong, she was smart, but she was gracious. She was a lady. She didn't shout. She didn't whine like Nancy Pelosi. She made her points, and there were very few conservatives, much less conservative women, at the podium on the media. So it was no contest. We selected her as somebody. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That's such an interesting point about you can be the strong and committed and dedicated and all these wonderful things, but also gracious. And you talked about being like a lady, right? Like that's not allowed, right? Like today you have to be brash and in your face and right at it. So how do you in our feminist culture, whatever, how do you encourage younger women or any age woman to be gracious and ladylike? Like, ooh, you're uncomfortable even talking, I'm uncomfortable even saying that, right? How do you do that?
Well, it's partly through our role models. For example, our January woman in our calendar, Great American Conservative Women. By the way, you can get it on our website, cblwomen.org. It's Senator Marsha Blackburn from Tennessee. Now, what a lovely, gracious lady she is. Married, family, great faith, and a strong conservative. So you have to let the girls, the young women, see that you can be a strong conservative and a gracious lady and be very effective. You don't have to be a shrieking feminist, a shrieking women's studies professor, a Pelosi, an AOC. You can be strong, conservative, a gracious lady.
I would argue you're much more effective being that way, as opposed to the shriekingness. Because, women, this is a whole different thing, but our culture says we got to raise boys more like girls and girls to be more like boys, and we have it backwards. And women have their different strengths, and they can get ahead more by, I think, accentuating those strengths. So, what is one policy that you think the Republican Party needs to really drive home that women in particular appeals to?
Well, there's a lot of key issues. I think one of the most important issues to the young women we work with really is life. And it's actually an issue where the party has been good, where President Trump, oh my goodness, putting Justice Barrett on the court. And it's an issue where polling shows that we are winning more young people on this issue. And I think we need to never give up on that one. In fact, that's an issue where it shows when you do never give up, you make progress. I think for some young people, it's a visual issue. It's the sonograms now that every young woman can get if she's pregnant and she sees a baby with arms and legs. And then you contrast that with the left. And for example, here in Virginia, Governor Northam, who says, well, after the baby's born, you've tried to abort it, but it's still living. Well, you could just make it comfortable and let it die. I mean, it's so shocking. It's so appalling that an awful lot of young men and women have shifted on the issue of life. And of course, the other end of that is old people. And my goodness, they're so inconvenient. But as conservatives, life is a really key issue for us. And I think it's a winning one with an awful lot of young people, and we're making progress.
Wow, such a good point. Do not give up on that. It's the truth. Michelle Easton from the CLARE Booth LUCE Center for Conservative Women, and I'm going to learn more about CLARE Booth LUCE in the process as well. What's the website, Michelle?
cblwomen.org. We got a bunch of webinars, including Marsha Blackburn on Wednesday, talking about her book, The Mind of a Conservative Woman. Just come to any of our social media and plug in.
Yeah, beautiful. Michelle, wonderful to talk to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you. God bless you.
We'll do it again. You too. Let's coming up next. We'll talk with Professor Vince Racaniello from Columbia University, our virologist professor. I want to talk about the vaccines, but also the safety of them. This is a concern, and I want to alleviate some of the perhaps. Do that next. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders, I always wait. Any news story I hear about COVID or whatever, I always wait until Monday when we can run it by our professor of virology at Columbia University, Vincent Racaniello. Professor, how are you, sir?
Very well. Like how you roll the R's there on Racaniello.
And of course, you don't have to wait till Professor Racaniello comes here. You can just watch his podcast, microbe.tv. Professor, I just want to throw it to you. What's the latest with vaccines? What do we know?
Well, the latest is that on the 10th of this week, and then I believe the 17th of the next week, the FDA is going to review the applications for emergency use for Pfizer and Moderna, and they're likely to get approved, and that means they can start distributing vaccines to, and we don't have that many, so we have to have a kind of line to figure out who's going to get it first, and, the CDC has already put out a list of people who are going to get it first, and you and I are not among the first, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah, I think I looked at the New York Times, had an infographic, and you put in your age and zip code and whatever, and I'm like 280 millionth. or something to get the
I was
vaccine.
180 million, yeah.
So why the 10th and the 17th, and why has England already approved the vaccine?
So the two companies gave the FDA their data from the phase 3 trial, which we've talked about, on previous episodes here, and the FDA has been reviewing it. And then on those two dates, they're going to sit down with the company and they're going to, ask questions and make sure they got everything in line. And why does the UK approve it earlier? They have a different method for approving it. They just get the data from the companies. They don't even go over it. They just say, what do you want to do, company? And the company says, we want this approved. And then the UK says, okay. So it's a different way of doing it. They don't have a committee reviewing the data, basically. They trust the company. So that's why they're a little bit faster.
Interesting. I wonder what that process is like here through the FDA. Like, how many people are combing over this data? Is it very complicated data, or do you think it's pretty easy to decipher data?
Well, it's the numbers of people who got the vaccine, the placebo, and what happened in each group, right? So there are only 195 people who got actual COVID, right? So it's not huge amounts of data. But so I think it's not too complicated. It just says, what were the side effects? What are the characteristics of these people? What kind of disease did they get? And it's pretty straightforward. And what I'm hearing is that, there are no serious side effects, just the usual pain at injection site, a little bit of fever and so forth. It's really nothing to worry about. So I think it's going to be a pretty straightforward meeting, frankly.
Okay. So I want to get to the safety. I know we talked about this last week, and you talked about how 2 months before there's possible ramifications of Guillain-Barré. Is that how you pronounce that? Mm-hmm. I know someone who had that once. It's pretty brutal. So the quick of that is, my understanding is it's like a temporary paralysis, like affects your nerves, right, and you may not be able to fully recover even fully, but it's pretty bad, right?
Yeah, it's right. It's like a temporary paralysis. And sometimes it happens after vaccination, right?
So you say 2 months until we know whether that's the case. That's 2 months from what? 2 months from when the first people in the trials started taking it, which we should probably know by now then, no?
Yeah, so it's 2 months already, and that's done. So there hasn't been anything serious. So I'm not worried at all about that.
Okay, so talk me off this ledge here. This is super important, because I know there's a lot of people who are upset or concerned about safety of it, and I'm not an anti-vaxxer, but this is like a new thing, and we've never, I don't know, everyone in the country is going to be taking this thing. So I just want to make sure that we talk about the safety. So I'm going to this dark place where there's like potential birth defects that come out of this, or it makes women sterile, or like bad things could happen. So tell me how that's not possible scientifically.
Well, first of all, not everyone's going to get the mRNA vaccines, right? There are a couple of other types that are different, and we're going to have to divide those up among the whole country. Okay, so some people get mRNA, some people will get adenoviruses, some people will get just protein-based vaccines, because we have AstraZeneca, eventually Johnson & Johnson, and Janssen Pharmaceuticals are going to come in the mix next year. Okay, so let's talk about the mRNA vaccines. This is just a piece of RNA that's injected into you. It lasts 2 days, and then it's gone. I found that out yesterday from Pfizer. 2 days, and we've talked about this before. You asked me how long does it stick around in you. The mRNA, it's injected in your arm, it makes the protein, your immune response goes after it, and then it's gone. So there's no way that this could modify you. It can't cause birth defects. Well, first of all, it's not even being tested in pregnant women, so they can't get it right now. It will have to be tested later. It's not going to make them sterile because it's not going to be around long enough to do anything. I don't see any scientific way that that's going to be an issue here. I understand why people are worried because it's brand new. Totally got that. But I see nothing in the way this works or what we've seen so far that would make anyone concerned.
So it doesn't affect anyone's DNA because it skips that step and it goes to the RNA, which is what the DNA makes. So
right. So that's a question people have been asking me. Is it going to affect my DNA? No, it won't, because it's RNA, and RNA typically stays away from DNA. In fact, RNA is made in our nucleus, which is where the DNA is. Then it leaves, goes out into the cytoplasm of the cell. And so this RNA, the best it can do is get in the cytoplasm, won't get near the nucleus, and it's going to be gone in 2 days. It's going to break up and go away. So really no long-term staying of this RNA in us.
So you mentioned different types of vaccines. What are the vaccines in the past that have caused like major birth defects? Like, what kind are those, and how would those have caused birth defects that this is not even in that same category? Does that make sense?
I don't know. I don't know about vaccines causing birth defects. There have been various other side effects caused by vaccines, like some of the polio vaccines can actually cause polio. Okay, because they are replicating vaccines, and they can cause, in like 1.5 million kids, they cause the kid to be paralyzed, and that's not good. And we stopped using those in the U.S. a long time ago because of that. And other vaccines can cause Guillain-Barré, as we said before. They can cause immunological reactions and so forth. But everyone is slightly different. But you have to remember, these side effects are all pretty rare. They're 1 in the millions, which, though, when you inoculate 100 million people, right, it adds up, of course.
So I guess, as I'm asking that question, I was thinking, maybe these aren't vaccines that I've heard in the past that cause these birth defects. They're more medicines that have in the past caused birth defects. And those are very different things, you're saying.
Totally different thing. Yes, you're absolutely right. There are medicines that have caused defects in the past, but not vaccines. They're very different. A vaccine targets different things in your body, and there's really, the only way it would happen if a pregnant woman got immunized, but we make sure we test it in pregnant women. And so we're not going to give these vaccines to pregnant women right now because they haven't been tested in them.
So when does that process take place? And so it's one thing to get a person to test in these trials, right? The 30,000 people you told us about. But that's harder probably to find pregnant women who are willing to be tested.
Well, I've actually gotten emails from a few women who are either pregnant or trying to get pregnant, and they say, when can I take this? Can I get in a test? I'd be happy to be tested, which is very brave, I think, right? Because it's not just you're putting out there. But when is this going to happen? I think not till next year, probably, when we have more of these doses and we get the initial people inoculated that need to be protected.
What percentage of people do you think need a vaccine before we have, herd immunity is the word that's always thrown around, right? But what percentage would you like to see before we can kind of start to all move around again?
I think it's between 50 and 70% for SARS-CoV-2. It depends on the virus and how well it spreads from person to person. And that's the number we've been kicking around for many, many months now, 50 to 70%.
Do you think we can get to that number in this country?
I think so, yeah. I think we're going to have enough doses. If you're worried about that, we can easily do that, by February, March, April next year. We'll have enough production.
Wow.
And it's just a matter of whether people accept it or not, right? Because as you say, some people are afraid, and I totally understand that. But I think the more that get out there and we see they're okay, there are no big problems as we get hundreds of thousands of people immunized, then I think more and more people will take it up because they want to go back to their lives, right? That's the key.
Yep. All right, let's talk about the clinical side, the doctor guest that you have on every week, who's wonderful. I read in San Diego, the average hospital stay was 12 days, and now it's gotten down to 6 days, which is wonderful. So, and they say a lot of that is because younger people are coming in. So there's a lot of different variables that go into that. But what have you been hearing?
Well, the hospital stay is decreasing. The problem is now, though, the hospitals are packed again, just like they were back in March and April. They're at capacity or over capacity because we have so many cases a day. I spoke just on Friday with Dr. Daniel Griffin, and he said, we have gotten better at taking care of patients and making them live. But we have so many now that we're still losing a lot of patients that we don't want to lose. We've gotten better at treating them in various ways, taking care of them in the hospital. But when he said yesterday, Sunday, he saw 22 patients yesterday, and he had to go, I was on a call with him at night, and he said, I have to go back and see more. And he said, the problem is, I'm not going to get to everyone today because there's no time. And some of those people are going to get worse as a consequence. So we may be better at treating them, but if hospitals are at capacity more, that's really bad in itself.
Yeah. What do we know about what goes on in the ICU now compared to in the past? Because that's in California, our latest lockdown is related to percentage of ICU capacity. And I remember the ICU in the beginning was all about the ventilators, right? But that seems not to be the case.
Yeah.
So what goes on there now?
Well, it's a matter of beds, right? Because you have any hospital has a limited number of ICU beds. and you can't manufacture them. You need the staff to take care of people, right? You need the beds. I mean, we've gotten really good at learning that you put off putting a tube into someone to deliver oxygen as late as you can because that can be damaging. You put people on their belly first for a while because that helps you to breathe a little better than lying on your back. You can give people steroids to help them, anti-clotting medicine and so forth. But the bottom line is the capacity and the personnel, right? It comes down to that, because if you have too many patients and you can't take care of them, then you're in big trouble.
Remember that graph you had before? Daniel Griffin worked on it. It was about the how often you spread it or when you spread it the most. And I remember you making the point that later, like in your hospital stay, you're not really spreading the virus as much. You're not making as much of the virus.
That's right.
Is that still the case?
Right. Yeah, the maximum spread is about at the time of symptom onset. When you first get your first symptoms, you're already transmitting either a day before that or at that day, and then you transmit for a few more days. Titer goes down in your upper tract, and then you're not effectively transmitting anymore. You know, if you get in the hospital, your viral loads are already way down. You can still transmit, and that's why all the personnel in the hospital have to wear protective equipment, of course, but the frequency is much lower. You have other problems then, and you have this multi-system inflammatory disease and so forth that we have to deal with. But the transmission is mainly around that symptom onset, right? A couple days on either side. Those are the days when you're most likely to give it to someone else.
Really interesting. We got about a minute or so. Any other final thought we need to know about that no one's talking about, sir?
A lot of people are asking me about measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, which seems to be somewhat protective against COVID-19. And this is an interesting story. I've been looking at the literature. You know, kids get this vaccine early on, and kids are very well protected against disease up until age 14, which is when the vaccine titers go away. So there's a great correlation there. And I'm looking forward to seeing more data, because maybe a shot of that could help in some populations. I don't know why it works, but so far, the data to me look pretty good.
Wow, so the idea is that because these kids get it when they're kids, that could have a effect on why kids don't seem to be getting it or spreading it as much.
Are getting very sick, right? They don't get serious disease. Maybe that's it. So I actually am impressed by those studies.
Now that you say that, I remember reading an article a while back, like somewhere in Africa, they don't have this shot, or I remember somewhere there was some sort of control group they had where COVID was like higher in kids. And I remember reading some correlation to this. Does this ring a bell at all or no?
Yeah, this is a correlation with measles, mumps, rubella vaccines. And you know what the interesting thing, it goes with the mumps part. It's not with measles or rubella, it's mumps specifically. And if you got mumps virus naturally, that doesn't protect you. It's the vaccine for some reason, because the vaccine is slightly different strain. So
I'd love to know if you can get the science on that one. I'd love to talk about that. That is super interesting. Wow, superb. Everyone needs to go to microbe.tv and watch the professor's podcast on all of this. Professor, always good to talk to you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And that's our show. True story. Mike Slater. See you tomorrow. Spread the word.